Those were the days.
Hey everyone, Justin Lee Howard here with another edition of Those Were the Days Extended. And today we're going to have a little fun. We are talking all things Beyond Salem, Chapter 1, because I'm probably going to do Chapter 2, and then, of course, the Very Salem Christmas at another dates when their anniversaries come up. But thought we'd take sort of this little like fun deep dive into Beyond Salem Chapter 1. And just kind of cover it a little, maybe a little bit of the plot, but more about its sort of conception and how it came to be, and sort of the cultural significance of it. It was just a very specific moment in time. And to take you back to that specific period of time, that was September 6th, 2021, when Beyond Salem premiered. And of course, here we go. This was, of course, a 5 episode companion series that we now know was a little bit of a test run for the future of Days. Of course, we didn't really know that at the beginning, but as it started to gain momentum and people were starting to get interested in it, and the fact that Peacock was putting so much money into it, it became clear that this might be the future, the direction that Days is moving into, in such a positive and good way. So that was kind of the inception. I don't know where you guys were, but I remember distinctly when this Beyond Salem was sort of being announced. I think it was, if I remember correctly, I don't know if it was Tony or Michael, but they may have put in our group chat for Dishin days that they just put the announcement, and it was like, I remember clicking on it. It was during a weekday, and it was like Beyond Salem with the logo. And I was like, huh, what's this? And then it was the little caption of 5 episode, I forget how they worded it, basically 5 episode companion series to air on Peacock. And it was like, wait, they're doing a separate show or they're doing a movie, whatever. I clicked it so fast and sort of read the article. And then in our group chat, we were sort of going back and forth, just talking about this, like, wait, what's going on here? What is this? But also being like really excited and intrigued by it. And I think especially because during those days, and again, this still happens today, but soap operas are a dying breed, or were a dying breed in a lot of ways. So every once in a while, people would stir up these rumors of, XX show is getting canceled, or it's on its last leg, or the powers that be are not that happy with it, kind of a thing. So I think soap operas in general and Days sort of didn't escape this. There was always question of whether or not it was going to be renewed, or if it was on its way out, and or when are we going to finally say goodbye to this beloved show. So when Beyond Salem was announced, it was like, oh, it's probably a safe bet to say that they're happy. NBC at the time is happy with Days, that they're putting money in, or specifically Peacock is putting money in to doing this sort of companion series. And it was just like, I think at the time the announcement was first, when we got the first announcement, I don't think there was much casting attached to it. I don't believe. But then sort of casting slowly, they start to dribble it out sort of little by little here. But yeah, this was sort of an interesting way. It was a nod to, like, those soap movies of 80s and 90s that I know Days did a couple times. I know other soap operas did. They would do these offshoot sort of movies to sort of just enhance the storyline of what was happening on screen. And I remember specifically the ones that Days did, at least during early to mid 90s, because if you remember back then, Days got heavily preempted by the OJ trial. And so I remember sort of, whether it was home with my mom or when I visit my grandmother, it was always like, okay, Days is not going to be on for a while. At first it was like a week here, a week there, and then the OJ Simpson trial sort of blew up, and then it was like, we're going to preempt, this is OJ is, the trial is ratings gold, so we're going to kind of preempt Days for a while. And it was preempted for a few months, actually. But I remember the sort of workaround that was to do this Days movie, and I believe it may have aired during the summer. I'm not 100% sure. I don't think I was in school at the time it aired, but I remember the promos, and it was going to be like, I think it was a Saturday night. It was going to be like 2 hours sort of craft it into this Days sort of movie, kind of like movie of the week kind of thing. And it was a way for them to progress the storylines while they were also preempted. So one, people didn't forget about them and they can kind of keep going. The actors can keep working. So before they eventually came back to screen. But yeah, this was sort of a nod to that. And then I remember it was just a lot of speculation of who's going to be in it. Is this going to be a separate show? Would it continue as a separate show, or is this just going to be a one-off? There was just a lot of discussing there. But I think it was always positive because it was, NBC and Days Peacock at the time, they're putting money into doing this companion series, and they wouldn't be doing that if the show was on its last leg or on its way out kind of thing. So I think just the faith in doing this just put a lot of faith not only in Days as a production, but also in the soap opera genre as it was. Again, like I said, little did we know how much of a test run that Beyond Salem would be to Days' eventual move to Peacock there. But we did sort of start to get a little bit of casting information, and one of the big ones here, which I just made me incredibly happy because these are two of my favorite characters, was, of course, we got the news that Lisa Rinna was sort of going to be like headlining the series, which for me was like amazing. Billy is one of my favorite characters. Love Lisa Rinna. Always happy to see her come back to the show. Whenever she does, it's sort of been few and far between the last few years. So the fact that she was going to be kind of headlining this series, and then the news came out that Eileen Davidson was coming in to play Kristen again, which was like huge news, but also a little bit confusing because Stacey had been playing her at that point for a few years, and we love Stacey and adore her, and she's doing great as Kristen. So we were like, wait, why is Eileen coming back to play Kristen for this? And then it seemed like they were making it a point to separate it a little bit from the show. So that's why they had sort of, and I think also wanted to go for kind of ratings and shock value by getting Eileen back in the space and kind of do a fun little bait and switch there, if you will. And I think because this was a limited run and they wouldn't need Eileen for too long, it was something that was probably appealing to her and something that she very easily could sign on to and do it in between her stints on Y&R. So yeah, I think once these two ladies were cast, I think it was a big go, and it just revved up the excitement even more. Of course, we had a lot more casting, not only in addition to our folks who were on the show. Of course, we had John and Marlena in the show. We had Abe and Paulina coming onto this, Lonnie and Eli. Who else do we have? We had Ben and Sierra coming on. But speaking of not only these two new returning characters, but we also got one of our favorite couples. We had Christy Clark, of course, and Austin Peck sort of come back as Carrie and Austin there. So that was a big sort of get to see, like, okay, we got, we're delving deep into sort of the 90s of this with Austin and Carrie back, and of course the characters of Billy and Kristen. And it just was, I remember there was such just anticipation about this, and I think people were really excited about it. It's, at the time before, this was years before the announcement of Beyond the Gates. This was years before soaps lately have been getting these bigger renewals with 3 and 4 years, as opposed to back then it was just, we wait for year after year or 1 year at a time renewals. So before that, like I said, I think we were in a sort of precarious spot for soap operas, and we were just coming off the pandemic and just coming off of a strike at the time, and so it was a little precarious on what were soaps sort of dying out, and what was the genre going to look like moving forward. So I think Beyond Salem was just a shot in the arm, not only for Days and for NBC and eventually Peacock, but just for the industry as a whole. And I think we sort of welcomed it. And I don't know about you guys, but when it premiered, I literally would sort of get up immediately put it on. It would be the first thing I did in the morning. I'd sit down, whether I had breakfast or not, but I jump up and watch the latest episode of Beyond Salem. And then, of course, we at Dishin Days, we did a whole show review of it. Go check that out if you haven't. But yeah, we were just madly in love with it. We thought it was so well done. We thought it was kitschy and kind of daring in a lot of ways because it was on Peacock. It allowed them to explore a little more racier topics and a little bit more longer episodes, which was really great. But yeah, kind of moving on to some of, not only do we have our sort of returning characters that we loved and our characters from the show who are going to migrate over to Beyond Salem, we also got some more casting news and some newbies coming onto the scene here. We, of course, had Charles Shaughnessy, who was back as Shane/Ryan, which was another big surprise of the show, sort of bringing that back. Of course, again, we had Austin and Carrie and their marriage trouble, which is always sort of a staple on the show in very, very, very 90s days. We got the introduction of Zach Tinker as our new Sonny. And I got to say, I think we fell in love with Zach at the time. I think Freddie wasn't coming back. And so they had Zach, and it was like, okay, how are we going to deal with the new Sonny here? And I think he knocked it out of the park. And go check out our interview we did with Zach Tinker. We interviewed him right after this and before he sort of came onto the main show, I believe. Just a really great guy and a really solid actor. And we applauded his performance, just being able to jump in, because it's not an easy character to sort of come in, especially on an offshoot project like this. And kind of, it was very much go, 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 go. There was, if he was on days and we were introducing him, it would be probably a very, very slow sort of rollout with putting in with different people and seeing where the chemistry lies. But this one, it was just him teaming up with Chandler Massey, of course, who was back as Will. And they sort of jumped in and yeah, he has become just one of our favorites over the years. So yeah, big congrats to him on this. He made just an excellent debut. And then, of course, we had our other leading man. We're introduced to Peter Porte as, he was the agent first, and then we later found out he was Dimitri, or came back to play Dimitri. We also got the return of Leo with Greg Rickard, who had been off the show for a little while, and this was a way to include him in Beyond Salem, but also bring him after this sort of to the main show, and also sort of mix him up a little bit with Will, Sonny, and Chad there. And then, of course, we got, like I said, Will and Sonny being reunited with Chad with that storyline, which I'm going to get into in a second. But I'll say before I throw up this next picture, which is hilarious and also very telling, one of the things that we always loved about sort of the Chad friendship with both Will, as he started out, again, he was best friends with Will when they were in high school and out of that. And then, of course, when Sonny came on, him and Sonny had a bond, and they all sort of became this one big group. And I think one of the things that we always remarked and really loved, just not just about Chad, but also Billy Flynn's performance with his scenes with characters Will and Sonny, is his openness to them and not shying away from. There was never a hint of uncomfortableness. There was never a hint of homophobia or uneasiness. And Billy Flynn's choice to always be very affectionate with both Chandler and Freddie at the time. And then, of course, with Zach, we'll see moving forward from here. It was always something that rang true to me of having, straight guy friends who are very comfortable in their sexuality, and it allows them to be a little bit more affectionate with you than they would maybe other straight guys or maybe even other female friends. And so that always rang true to me. We always applauded Billy for sort of jumping in. He was always, there was always just affection there between best friends. Like you would, whenever they see each other, they immediately hugged. And Billy oftentimes would always make sure he kissed them on the cheek or kissed them on the forehead, or affection was always at the forefront of their friendship here. And I think that is sort of what allowed Ron at the time, who was writing for Days and also a writer for Beyond Salem, to sort of introduce this storyline, which just had us completely sort of spellbound and gagged. This, of course, is our three main leading men. In a full drag here, if you remember the storyline, they had to pose undercover and in drag for the plot. This, of course, is we have Billy Flynn in the middle as Belinda China Shop. Then we have Chandler Massey on the left-hand side here as Amanda Bottom. And then, of course, we had on the right Mr. Zach Tinker as Sunny here as drag name Sunny Delight. This, of course, I think was one of the highlights of Beyond Salem, just seeing these three sort of men just go for it and perform in drag and just do their thing, and how just effing great do they look, and how they just kind of went with it. And I think they really jumped in. And I remember in our review, we really applauded them for just going there. And I think this was one of the great things of being able to do this offshoot one and to do it on Peacock was you can be a little bit more racy. We can be a little bit more daring. We could throw in a few more swear words here and there. We can do a plot line like this on Peacock and on Beyond Salem, where if we maybe did it on the flagship show, we may have had to tone it down a little bit, or we may have maybe change the plot line a little bit to be a little bit more sensitive or even keeled. I don't know, but it was nice to watch this offshoot and have it be sort of as queer and as alternative as it wanted to be, and as racy, and a few more curse words here and there, and a little bit more action. Was just very much appreciated. I think it prepared us a little bit for what was to come with Days moving to Peacock. I know one of the things we loved and we commented on in our review was just the way it was shot and the way it was looked, and it really had a little bit of a different feel to it, which we really loved. The credits in the oh God, what's the word I'm looking for? In between the different segments, how they would do the scenes, and we remarked like it reminded us of a lot of like early '90s Melrose Place, and this just had just a general '90s feel, whether it was Days or just what was happening at the time of those sort of nighttime soaps. It very much gave that. So another sort of plot line which I think sort of thrived on not only Beyond Salem, but of course being on Peacock, was the one with Ben and Sierra. And if you've watched us over the years, we've sort of described them as an incredibly sort of randy, horny couple as it is. So having them get this plot line where they sort of visit this sex party, and Sierra is pretending to be Princess Greta, and Ben at the time is pretending to be Austin, and it was just a throwback to those 90 plot lines. And then we met Lily Faversham's grandchild and her husband, and just the sexcapades that these two kind of went on. I think it was really fitting to be able to give it to these two characters who, again, we always joke how sexual they are in nature and with each other, and Victoria Konefeld and Rob Wilson were just so game for this, and it was fun, it was sexy, it was daring, it was a little steamy, and so I'm glad they sort of got to do it. Of course, Sin had to be a part of Beyond Salem. They were at the time one of the most popular couples on the show, and just a rabid fan base. So I think it was a good idea to kind of lead with them as sort of the leading sort of younger couple moving storyline for this one along. So yeah. It was just it was a great way, I think, to do a different version of Days. And like I said, it was a way for Ron to be a little bit risque and be a little bit more queer identifying, and be a little bit more gay. And then of course we had Jackie Cox and him sort of looking like Billy, and sending up sort of Lisa Rinna and her connection to the gay community and drag community. And it was just a lot of fun, I think, and just really, really entertaining. But yeah, sort of the results of that, I think watching, don't think any of us knew how sort of amazing it would be, but the ratings were absolutely through the roof at the time. I think going along, we were sort of starting to get a little bit of a hint of like, oh, if this does well, will there be other offshoots? Will we get more Beyond Salem's? Or it was starting, it was starting to get put out there that maybe like this was a soft launch for it moving eventually to Peacock, and this was their way to sort of test the audience if they would one watch Peacock, and two if it was good enough, would they follow sort of the show there. So I think it incredibly accomplished its goal. Days did eventually move to Peacock, where it has been doing incredibly well. It is always part of the top 10. And then with that, we also got the two companion pieces. We got Beyond Salem Part 2, which I'll probably do at a different time. And then we got the Very Salem Christmas, which was a fun way to do sort of a what if episode where we got a lot of these actors coming back and changing the trajectory of their characters' future. With Will sort of writing this Christmas story and wanting to do it in an interesting way and using his family and people he knew as a basis for it. So again, I'll probably do those at a later date as a fun thing. But yeah, this was also a way just to bring back some really beloved characters and actors who we hadn't seen for a while. And if you know on our show, we're always talking about sort of bringing people back. And even if it's for like a couple episodes or if it's a quick scene on a phone call or having people mention a lot, this was a really great way to just sort of settle in and relax into nostalgia. Like I said, having Lisa Rinna and Eileen Davidson kind of come back with Charles Shaughnessy and Chandler Massey and Christy Clark and Austin Peck. It was, and then we of course we had Leon Hunley and Theo Penglis kind of getting more to do here. So it was just a great way to see those actors and see those characters and kind of explore these mini capsule storylines that if you did them on the show, they'd probably have to be bigger and have a bigger meaning, but it was great to sort of give us a little bit of nod to nostalgia, especially with the plot lines. Princess Gina, that plot line was heavily featured and referenced. Alamania was heavily featured. We had, of course, the fun little housewives shout out between Lisa and Eileen with, the Beast comment and the flipping the table. Of course, again, we had Austin and Carrie's marriage trouble, which is very 90s and very old school days. So yeah, we're very pleasantly surprised. One thing I regret is I'm sorry that if you didn't get a chance to see Beyond Salem 2, or Very Salem Christmas, they unfortunately are not on Peacock. I believe they are available for digital media, I still believe. So you might be able to pick up a copy of that. My fingers are crossed that they reintroduce them and bring them back to Peacock, even if it's maybe for a limited run. I know the 60th anniversary is coming up. It might be a nice little thing that kind of featured them for a couple months so people can get to see them and kind of enjoy them. But yeah, that was sort of a little bit of a deep dive into Beyond Salem. Again, it was a very specific point in time and I think really enjoyable. We really loved it. It was very much fast tracked and we got it. They announced it and we got it a couple of months later and just sort of basked in how good and overall how fun and entertaining it was. So like I said, fingers crossed we either see those previous ones come back, or you know what, fingers crossed maybe we get another installment in the future. But yeah, that was our little trip down memory lane for Beyond Salem. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining me, and I will see you next time.
Those were the days.